This Torah class is brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.
Let's be honest. Most regular Jews struggle with Elul and the Yom Noraim. It's that time of year when we wake up every morning and we're met with a mixture of pressure and guilt and the heavy awareness that the Yom Noraim are creeping closer. And for many of us, it's overwhelming. Because let's face it, real change is hard. Tshuva is uncomfortable. Breaking bad habits is one of the hardest things a human being can do. And here's where it gets even harder. For some people, the whole thing feels so draining, so emotionally heavy, that they just check out before we even begin. Elul becomes a month of intense Jewish guilt, and they quietly decide, I'm out. It's just not for me. But what if we've been looking at it all wrong? What if Elul isn't about overwhelming pressure to change, but about something deeper, something more empowering? I want to share with you a perspective that's not just refreshing, it might just rewire the way you think about Elul forever. Picture this. You're having a typical day, scrolling, working at your office, sipping coffee, caught somewhere between errands and emails, when out of nowhere, the billionaire owner of your company approaches you. Now, he's not just any billionaire, he's the kind of man who buys islands the way most people buy gum at the checkout counter. He's dressed immaculately, he's calm, controlled, he walks over to you, leans in just close enough, and with a small smile on his face, he says, I'd like to offer you a deal. At the end of this year, you and I will sit down together, just the two of us. We'll go through the al-chet list, every single sin one by one. And each sin you can truthfully say you didn't commit, I'll give you $10 million. 10 million per sin. No gimmicks, no strings, just hard, cold cash. That's the offer. If you can look him in the eye and say, I didn't do that one, the money is yours on the spot. Now pause for a moment. Would you think twice before typing something into your phone you shouldn't be searching? Would you hesitate before letting a sharp word slip from your mouth? Would that little lie you were planning on saying still feel worth it? Of course it wouldn't. Because suddenly the most minor act of restraint becomes the smartest financial decision of your life. It's not just right, it's profitable. You start walking through your day like a spiritual accountant measuring every choice against an invisible vault of wealth. Suddenly, refraining from sin is not difficult at all. In fact, it's a no-brainer. Now imagine the reverse. You're on a hike in Israel, wandering into some region that you probably should not be in, when suddenly you're captured by Al-Qaeda, the ruthless Muslim extremist group, and they drag you to some remote hideout somewhere. They lock you up, and after a few tense days, they make you an offer. They'll let you go with a tracker on your ankle. You'll be free, but only temporarily, because at the end of the year, they'll find you, they'll bring you back, and they'll put you on trial. Their version of justice. No lawyers, no appeals, just you and a list and a sentence. They will pull out the al-chet list, and every sin you're guilty of, they will sever a limb. Speak a word of Lashon Hara, there goes your pinky. Steal even a few dollars from your employer, say goodbye to your left earlobe. Ignore an obvious act of chesed that you could have done, they'll cut off your big toe. How do you think you would act throughout that year? Pretty sure you do anything to ensure that that list is as clean as snow. So here's the haunting question. Why don't we respond to the same way to schar v'einish, the reward and consequence built into every one of our actions? We all know that every mitzvah comes with it unimaginable reward. We also know that every avera can bring with it real pain and punishment. So why doesn't that knowledge move us? Why doesn't it push us to act differently? The answer is as tragic as it is true, because it doesn't feel real. It's abstract. Schar v'einish is a concept we first met in elementary school, somewhere where we colored it into worksheets and we zipped it into our backpacks and never really unpacked it again. It was just left behind, filed away in the attic of our mind, gathering dust, while the front desk of our attention is run by far more urgent things like money and status and image and pleasure. Most people don't ignore mitzvahs or commit averos because they don't know the consequences. It's because those consequences just don't feel real. Telling someone that their soul will one day be cleansed by some distant, abstract, esoteric, spiritual fire in some invisible spiritual world right as they're about to do something they shouldn't do isn't exactly a strong deterrent, because it's not vivid, because it doesn't land. But imagine if it was real to us. Imagine if we managed to bring that reality into focus. Imagine how different our choices might look. Now, you're probably thinking, okay, the way to make all this real to us is to open some deep esoteric sfarim and learn about the next world, about Gehenna, about fiery angels, about spiritual retribution, and perhaps someday that's a good idea. But that's not the move right now. There's something far simpler, something far more practical, and it's hiding in plain sight. The Gemara in Brachos, Daf Hey Amud Beis, it says, a path to real change, step by step. It says, if someone wants to do tshuva, let him immerse himself in Torah. And if that doesn't work, you should say Kriya Shema with real kavana. And if that doesn't awaken you to do tshuva, then you should think about the day of death, a sort of cold, sombering reality check meant to jar a person into clarity. And hopefully after that, he'll be inspired to do tshuva. But before all of those strategies, before any mention of Torah, of davening, of mortality, the Gemara offers something surprisingly short, almost too short. It says, Lo'elam yargiz adam yetzer toiv al yetzer hara. A person should always arouse his yetzer toiv against his yetzer hara. So at first glance, it sounds basic, right? A little too basic, like telling a marathon runner, you want to win the race? Just run faster. Yeah, thanks. Very helpful. But Reb Eli Lapian and Lev Eliyahu, he totally blows the door off this line. He explains, the Gemara isn't just telling you to fight your yetzer hara. You knew that already. It's telling you how to fight. The way to fight the yetzer hara is by reminding yourself again and again and again that the yetzer tov offers a better life than the yetzer hara ever could. Not just a holier life, not just a more Jewish life, a better, deeper, fuller, richer, freer life. The Torah path isn't just right, it's good. The yetzer hara whispers into all our ears that he has better pleasures, faster highs, flashier thrills. But all he ever delivers is the same thing, a quick hit and then a long, aching crash. He glows for a second and then he disappears, leaving you empty. And what's difficult is that it's easy to fall into his marketing trap. If an alien landed on Earth today and took a look around, they'd assume the whole point of life is chasing beauty and money and power and fame and desire. They would think that the winners in this world are the ones who shine the brightest, and those who resist are just missing out. But we know better. We've been there before. We've been down the road that he tries to lead us. We've seen what happens when people chase every craving. They are met with nothing but anxiety and addiction and broken relationships and burnout. Their life becomes a hollowed out existence all dressed up in designer clothing. And we've seen the opposite, the steady joy of someone who lives with integrity, a parent who sacrifices for their kids, a spouse who builds trust over time, a Jew who walks into Shabbos with light in their eyes, not because they have to, but because they can't imagine life without it. That's real Eineg. That's real life. The Gemara is giving us a most powerful weapon we have. It's called clarity. Remind yourself constantly that the Yetzer Tov doesn't deprive you, it elevates you. Watching your words isn't repression, it's freedom. Guarding your eyes isn't restriction, it's peace. These acts of self-control, often mistaken for limitation, are actually the foundations of a richer, fuller life. Because the truth is, living with a loose tongue leads to regret, not release. Letting your eyes just absorb everything around you doesn't expand your world, it dulls it. Venting unchecked emotions may feel raw and real, but it almost never brings healing. Real joy, real presence, real greatness comes from living with intention, choosing depth over distraction, choosing presence over performance. It's knowing that being fully there for your family is more meaningful than earning another dollar, that living with spiritual awareness brings a lot more satisfaction than chasing fleeting highs. A life of restraint isn't a life of lack. It's a life of clarity and purpose and lasting beauty. The more we internalize that truth, the easier it becomes to make better choices. Not because we have to, but because we finally want to. Sin is always born from the same lie. If I don't do this, I'll miss out. But that's false. It's false every single time. That's why the Gemara doesn't start with threats of punishments or promises of paradise. It starts with a mental shift. Wake up. Remind yourself, reframe the battle. Elul and the Yom Noraim is not about sheepishly going to shul to pretend like we're okay with exchanging our good life with the one that Hashem wants us to live. The Yom Noraim are not robbing us of our quality of life. It's offering us something better. Other religions love to talk about the next world, about kingdom come, about the great reward that awaits those who are martyr themselves. Do you know how many times the Torah explicitly talks about Olam Haba? A grand total of 0 times, not even once. You want to know why? Because that's not where we start. We start here, in this world, with this life, because a Torah life isn't just the best afterlife. It's the best life, period. We are called the Am Midushne Eineg, the people intoxicated with pleasure, because we are the people fattened, not by indulgence, but by a deep, holy, soul-filled delight, the only one that lasts. And the more we remind ourselves of that truth, the more we make it real, the easier it becomes to choose it. When a lot of people think of Jewish history, they often picture a long, gray corridor lined with grief. Pogroms pounding at midnight, ghettos filled with fear, German trains traveling throughout Europe, a people forever fleeing, forever hunted, a brutal chain of tragedies after tragedies, occasionally interrupted by a breath of peace. That's how many people view Jewish history. And yes, those shadows are real. They're part of our story. But they're not the whole story, not even close. Because if you zoom out, if you listen not just to the screams of Jewish history, but also to the whispers of Jewish history, you'll find something else. You know what you'll find? You'll find beauty. You'll find dignity. You'll find lives so saturated with meaning that even the darkest backdrops couldn't drain it of its light. Because when you look at Jewish history with mature eyes, you realize that for the overwhelming majority of world history, the Jewish people have enjoyed the best quality of life of any people on earth. I'll say that again. For the overwhelming majority of world history, the Jewish people have enjoyed the best quality of life of any people on earth for thousands of years. The Jewish people have lived lives that were in many ways the richest and most elevated on earth, not in palaces, not on thrones, but in the places that count. Well, you might say, what are you talking about? We lived in fear, in poverty, in exile. We were hated. We were hunted. We were harassed. Maybe so. But that's only if you measure life in luxury and power. But Jews don't measure life that way. We're far deeper than that. True, often we were poor, but we were rich in ways that mattered. True, our homes were often tiny, but they were filled with laughter and tradition and warmth. Children grew up not on screens, on stories, on melodies carried by candlelight. We knew how to cry, but more importantly, we knew how to sing. There was a structure, there was belonging, there was purpose, a rhythm of holy days and sacred nights. We had the strongest families on earth, the most joyful rituals, the purest children. Our weeks were anchored by Shabbos, a rhythm of light and love that the world still can't understand. We mourned with meaning. We celebrated with soul. Communities weren't just zip codes. They were lifelines. Simchas were shared by everyone. Pain was carried by everyone. You knew who your father was. And if you didn't have a father, the entire town raised you. We may not have had mansions, but we had marriages built on loyalty and trust. We didn't dine with royalty, but our children sang songs that the world can't even comprehend. We didn't need wealth to feel rich. We didn't need power to feel strong. We had values that couldn't be stolen. We had Shabbos tables that made kings look poor. You want to talk about quality of life? The world chases it in stadiums and movie theaters. We found it in Torah and Chesed. The Western world builds entire industries to treat loneliness. We have community events bursting at the seams. You can't get a parking spot. They hire therapists to process pain. We have Sefer Tehillim. Where others cracked, we cling, not just to survival, to joy, to each other, to Hashem. The Western world counts success in square footage. But if success means love and meaning and family and purpose, then we've been living the good life far longer than any other people on earth. And that's exactly what the Yetzer Hara doesn't want you to realize. Because the second you wake up to the reality, to the fact that the Torah life is the better life, not just the holier one, he's got nothing left to sell you. That's the secret to changing how we see mitzvahs and averos, not just as obligations or rules, but as the only true path to joy and to clarity and to freedom. Averos don't offer freedom, they just advertise it. Mitzvahs are freedom. You just have to step far enough back to see it. And that's the first step to fighting the Yetzer Hara. Not with guilt, not with fear, but with clarity, a deep, visceral knowing that the Torah way is not just right, but good. It's the good life we've always had and can always choose again. Perhaps the most dazzling symbol of Western values can be found blazing in the Nevada desert, the city of Las Vegas. No place on earth screams indulgence and fantasy and live your truth louder than the city that is called Sin City. And towering at the heart of that city is the Luxor Hotel, this massive black pyramid-shaped hotel. And at the very top of that hotel pyramid beams the brightest man-made light on earth. 45 xenon light bulbs, each the size of a washing machine, blasts a beam of light into the sky with such unbelievable intensity that pilots are warned to steer clear of it because they literally can get blind. Astronauts have spotted it from space. That beam shines with 42.3 billion candle power. It is the brightest man-made light on the face of the earth. That is the Western world's definition of light. Big, loud, impressive, empty. Our light? Our light came from a different mountain. Smaller, unassuming, wind-whipped, wrapped in thunder, a mountain called Har Sinai. It didn't shoot lasers into the sky. It didn't need to, because from its peak came a light not meant to dazzle, not meant to distract, to direct, not to blind, to illuminate. It doesn't scream, it speaks. It's a light that doesn't burn you out, it builds you up. The pasuk says, "Kfirim rashu v'ra'evu v'darshei Hashem lo yachzeru kol tov." Those who choose raw hunger, who follow their cravings, remain starving their whole life. But those who seek Hashem lack nothing. That's not poetic fluff or some future tense promise for Olam Haba. That's a fact of this world. You want a good life? A stable, joyful, purpose-driven, deeply satisfying life? Follow the Torah. Plain and simple. In 2008, the New York Times partnered with the Gallup organization to launch a massive research project, a coast-to-coast deep dive into happiness in America. And they conducted hundreds of thousands of phone interviews, reaching people in every state and every city and town. And respondents were asked about everything about their emotional well-being, their job satisfaction, their physical health, relationships, overall quality of life. They went through everything that would make a person happy. And the goal was to find out which group in America was actually living the quote-unquote good life, to discover which people in America were the happiest people. They figured the results would fascinate the public and maybe even inspire people to adopt the habits and the values of the happiest communities in the world. They called it the Gallup Healthways Wellbeing Index. And when the results came in, the New York Times quietly decided not to put it on the front page as they planned. Why? Because the answers didn't exactly fit the cultural narrative. Instead, the findings were tucked away in the weekend review section on the third page. Want to guess who ranked as the happiest people in the entire United States? Yeah, you guessed it. Observant Jews. Not just Jews, observant Jews. Not the billionaire tech moguls, not the yoga on a mountain wellness crowd, not the Botoxed influencers sipping smoothies on a beach somewhere. Not even the regular Americans running around doing their thing. The happiest people in the entire North America are the observant religious Jews. It's the people who still dress like it's the 1920s. The ones who start their morning with tefillin and tefillah. The ones who don't use technology for 26 hours every week. The ones who fast, who pray, who cry over ancient texts and whisper blessings over bread. They're the happiest. The world was stunned. You know who wasn't stunned? Us. Because deep down, we've always known Beneath the static of modern life, the noise, the guilt, the confusion, we know exactly where joy lives. We've tasted it on Shabbos, we've felt it in the warmth of our homes, we've heard it in the laughter of our children, in the quiet strength of a community that shows up when it matters most. We've seen it in the beauty of living with purpose. And Elul, this sacred stretch of time, is our return to that joy. That's the mindset we need. That's the shift that can turn Elul from spiritual chore we dread into a soulful reset that we crave, from a hurdle to a haven, from guilt to greatness. Because maybe the sound of the shofar every year isn't some divine alarm clock that's slapping you in the face, yelling, "Change or else." Maybe it's something softer and stronger. Maybe it's the blast of a ship's horn waiting at the harbor, signaling that the boat to a fuller, richer, holier, more meaningful, more harmonious life is about to set sail. And it's telling you to climb aboard before you miss the boat entirely. Maybe the shofar isn't a threat, but an invitation to climb aboard the boat sailing to the most fulfilled life on earth. Because the question of Elul isn't, are you ready to change? The question is, are you ready to stop missing out?
You've just experienced another Torah class brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.